Welcome to this week's Thursday Night Live. My name is Gino D'Angelo. For those of you that have either just stumbled upon me or didn't know me, or maybe you've just recently started watching my videos, every Thursday night at 7 p.m., rain, shine, no matter what, I go live to give you an update of what's going on, excuse me, in the real estate market, in Petoskey, in Northern Michigan, Traverse City, everywhere, just to make you a more educated home buyer, or more educated renter, or just know what is going on in Northern Michigan. And we've got a good one for you tonight. We obviously just had the election, and although I think a lot of people are surprised that we learned the outcome so quickly, it was pretty painless and just basically a typical election night for the most part as far as the results, and not a lot of contention afterwards. Stick around until the end. I'm going to tell you what red flags, yes, what red flags to look for when viewing a house, meaning you found some houses you want to see, you got your agent, you're going to go inside. What should you be looking for? So that's going to be some valuable information. And then a couple of things that are locally relevant that are important to me that I think are exciting. So before we hop into it, if you're watching, where are you from? Drop it in the comments and I will do my best to respond to all of you. I want this to be as interactive as possible, meaning if you're watching and you have a question about something, we've done a few of these now. We get a lot of questions about building costs, a lot of questions about when's a good time to buy, what's going on with the market, what's going on with prices. We're going to answer a lot of those questions tonight. And if you're watching this on the replay, that's awesome too. We're here for both the live viewers and the people who are going to watch this after. And if you happen to watch this as a replay and you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. That way you will be alerted as to when these are going to happen. You can hop on and have a conversation with the rest of us. I think this is we were talking about in the office today, this is either my third or fourth time doing this. I'm not sure. And they keep getting better and better. And actually, I've been making YouTube videos about real estate in Northern Michigan for a little over 2 years now. And I've actually started to really love doing these lives. It's not remembering a script or wanting to give a bunch of information. It is just a conversation, like you and I are in the same room. And I'm extremely happy to do this. And I'm honored for all of you that show up every week. I think we had 20 people on at a time last week, and everybody was asking questions. And some of the guests were asking questions to each other. And it was really a fun experience. So I do this for you free of charge. I'm never going to ask you for anything other than if you're thinking about buying or selling a house in Northern Michigan, give me a call and I would love to help you. Our first comment actually comes from my sister. She's from Indian River, Michigan, living in Gillette. So Christine, thank you for watching. I hope you and Ruby enjoy this, and we will get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight, before we get started, is two topics that are near and dear to my heart. And one of them has very little to do with Northern Michigan, other than we have a few Starbucks in Northern Michigan. And let me share the screen. Starbucks started their holiday menu, and I don't know what happened, but once upon a time when Starbucks started releasing their holiday cups, and this is what it looks like this year, it was just something that sort of kicked off the holiday season for me, and I really enjoyed it. I drink black coffee, for those of you that know me. I always have. I always will. I don't care about the rest of the drinks, although it looks like they have a pretty good menu. Caramel brulee latte is – my assistant Candace looks forward to this every year, so I'll probably have to buy her 10 or 20 of these before the season's over. But I just think this is a fun thing to do. I don't know why it makes me so happy, but I love when the holiday cups come out. They're fun. I got one today, probably get one tomorrow. So that is an exciting happening in Northern Michigan. Second of all, and I got to get the screen for this. This is something else that I want to bring up. Petoskey's football team is undefeated. They won last week, the first playoff game ever let me get out of here. The first playoff game ever in Northman Stadium. They beat John Glenn. I want to say the score was like 61-0 or something, or 61 to 61 to, let me see if I can pull this up. Bear with me one second. They won 61-21. They're up like 41-0 in the first half. The first quarter. They are having one of the best years I've ever seen a high school football team have. They are 10-0. They've got a game for the district finals this Friday, tomorrow against Mount Pleasant. I'm excited to attend it, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And I don't know about you, but whether it's the Lions or Petoskey, when your local football team is doing well, it gives you a little bit extra of a pep in your step. So super proud of the team, and I'll keep you posted on how they do. So without further ado, you guys came here to become more knowledgeable about Northern Michigan real estate. So I'm going to tell you, you're probably wondering, and I've got a lot of questions. Trump won. How is that going to affect the Northern Michigan real estate market? And I'll be honest, we started hearing people, I would say even as late as, or as early as August, people started really putting their plans on hold because of the election. There was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if it was going to be contentious. There was a lot of, this election season was really incredible. You had, the sitting president stepped down, Kamala replaced him, Trump getting shot at. It was really, as somebody who's followed politics for their entire adult life, it was really an interesting campaign this time. So August, the market starts to slow down. People are putting their plans on hold because of the election. And that ran from August, I would say, all the way up until maybe as early as a week ago, when it felt like, and I don't know why this was because the election hadn't happened yet, but it felt like the market let up and people were more likely to do something. And I don't know if it was because they felt that the election was, imminent and so getting so close that it was going to be over pretty soon, but the market really picked up in the last couple of weeks, and it is unseasonably busy right now. Interest rates are still a little bit high. There is a lot of inventory on the market, and one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is how, believe it or not, the lowering of interest rates will improve the housing inventory, because right now there's a lot of people that have very low interest rates, and it's hard to trade. First of all, prices have gone up, but then to trade your 3 or 4%, or maybe even less than 3% interest rate to get a 6.5% or 7%, suddenly you're trading, to move up in a home, you're trading, that becomes a very big payment. So we're going to go over some slides tonight. I get a lot of questions, and this actually came up. Somebody commented on a YouTube video I did about saying that I should talk more about the political landscape in Northern Michigan. And we had a little bit of a back and forth, me and this person. And I feel that, it's not my job to put my political beliefs or what I feel or what I think. So I dug up some information, and it's nice that we just had an election because it shows in black and white how Northern Michigan voted, or how Michigan in general and Northern Michigan voted. So I want to add this slide. This is a map of Michigan. As you know, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. And this is pretty common for an election year. It's a little bit more, Michigan for the longest time, Michigan is a swing state. And this year, last time Biden won, this year Trump won, the cycle before that Trump won. So that's why they call it a swing state. I will say this, Northern Michigan tends to lean a little bit more liberal than conservative. And that's because if you look at this map right here that I'm showing right now, if you can see where I'm circling, this area is probably, I should know this stat, but I don't, maybe 70%, 80% of the population of the state are located. This is Wayne, Macomb. This is Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb counties. That makes up Detroit. If you look over here, it's Grand Rapids. Surprisingly, if you look over to this side, Leelanau is the only blue county in Northern Michigan outside of, if you go a little bit further north to, this is, if you can see my cursor, this is where, can somebody tell me, can you see my cursor? I don't know if this is working or not correctly, but hopefully it is. If you look at my cursor, this is Marquette. It's a, probably it's like the Detroit of the UP. It's a really cool town, tons of breweries and cool restaurants. And it's just a really fun place to hang out. There's a lot of young people there, which, I'm not saying anything that the world doesn't know, but usually a large quantity of young people means they're probably more likely to vote blue than red. So again, over here, Emmett County, these are the areas we really service. And when we're talking, okay, can't see the cursor. Okay, well, we'll do that. Thank you so much for telling me that. So if you look, Emmett County, Sheboygan County, Prescott, this is the area we service. Grand Traverse, that's where Traverse City is. Leelanau is up the peninsula. That's Northport, Sutton's Bay. So by and large, Northern Michigan typically is a very red area. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean that Northern Michigan tends to lean a little bit more Republican. I get a lot of, I hear a lot of disparaging comments that, we're rednecks or we're Hicks or we're racist. And, I've got a lot of friends that are different ethnicities here. And I couldn't tell you that couldn't be further from the truth. So tonight we want to talk about what's going to happen now that the election's over. So I went through and I did a ton of research over the last couple of days to prepare for this live so I could give you the most accurate information as possible. Home sales went up 9 of the last 11 presidential elections. And if you look back, you can see in the bottom of the scale, the last time they didn't go up, that was quite a long time ago. So meaning in recent history, certainly I was born in 1983. So just after I was born was probably the last time they went down after the election. So if you look at the election year, home sales actually went up. Mortgage rates this year was a little bit of an anomaly because this didn't happen, but mortgage rates decreased leading up to the last 8 of the last 11 presidential elections. And if you saw today in the news, the Fed caught another 0.25%. And I also get a lot of questions about why doesn't that automatically reduce the interest rates? And it's kind of a long it's kind of a long answer to a short question, but it's just not the way it works. Mortgage rates are a market, and the mortgage rates had that 25 basis point cut baked into them. So interest rates year over year, lower, and this is something we were talking about earlier, lower interest rates will unleash some of the pent up demand for housing. As I was talking about a second ago, there are a lot of people right now that would love to move, but it is just cost prohibitive right now to do so. So they're more likely to stay in the houses they're in. And I've even talked to a lot of builders. People are remodeling versus, buying that next house. And it's caused a little bit of gridlock in the market, meaning there's tons of people that want to buy. And that is something I talk about often is people think that there's a chance that the prices might crash in Northern Michigan. And again, I haven't really heard that as much lately, but I can't tell you how much pent up demand there is, as the previous slide just said, and how many people there are on the sidelines. Meaning if I go through my, boring old CRM that houses every lead we have and every person that's ever reached out to us about buying a house, I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I'm just one agent, and there's a lot of us in Northern Michigan. And I constantly hear that they're either, waiting for the prices to drop a little bit or waiting to see what happens with the economy. But there are buyers out there, and a lot of them are cash buyers waiting for some of this uncertainty. And, certainly getting past the election goes a long ways in that direction. And then also, I think now that we're past the election and interest rates should be coming down maybe the first quarter, second quarter of 2025. I think we're going to have a very strong upcoming year. And that's certainly my opinion. So back to these slides. Are home prices still going to go up? Economists predict, yes, home prices are expected to continue to increase through 2029, just not at the rate they did in 2020 to 2023. Mainly because they just can't go at that pace forever. At some point, there's, other big picture economic factors such as income, such as, we talk about this a lot on my videos or even on the last couple of lives. One of the reasons that Northern Michigan is so popular is it is still a perceived value. And I've got calls, from those of you, some of you may even be watching tonight, but I've got calls from buyers who want to relocate from Florida, Texas, even Ohio, and they just feel that the lifestyle here for the money is still much more, there's still much more perceived values than in other areas, especially if you look at, I think there's the first from 2020 to 2023, what caused the prices to go up in Northern Michigan was the demand. And what caused the demand to go up was not only was it, Michigan, specifically Northern Michigan, has always been a popular area to live, but what really heightened the demand were unforeseen circumstances such as work from home, the short-term rental boom, baby boomers being able to sell their houses for a lot of money in other areas and taking that money and buying homes in Northern Michigan. And I do think we're going to see some of, unfortunately, what's happened in Florida over the last year with weather. I can't tell you, just me as, one fairly productive agent, how many buyers I've had call me from Florida that just said, enough's enough. We're sick of paying the, weather lottery, for lack of a better term, and we just want to relocate. It's hot here in the summer. We have all this uncertainty. It's sort of scary. We can't get home insurance. Let's come to Michigan, where you guys have 4 distinct seasons. It's not sweltering hot in the summer. We don't have to worry about as many weather catastrophes other than the snow. And on top of that, we're not getting as much snow as we used to. So some of those Floridians can sort of handle the winter a little bit better than they could have otherwise. So how far do rates need to fall before you will buy a home? And I found this really interesting. If you look at below 6.5 and between less than 6.5 to 6%, that's about what? 42%. So 42% of the buying population would buy a house if the rates were between 6 and 6.5%. If that drops a little bit lower to 5.5%, now you're talking about, let me just do this quick math, almost 75% of the market. Well, I can do it 74% because there's only 26% left. Below 5%, I think that's a little bit of a pipe dream. I'm not sure we're going to be able to see interest rates drop that far, but it will be interesting to watch what happens as, hopefully we fall between, 6.5. I think that's reasonable. I think getting down to 6 is probably where we'll find the equilibrium. I've got a really good friend that's our preferred lender that has been a friend of mine for 20 years. He was talking that I don't know that we're going to see it get to 5.5%, but if we do, that would be great and probably would cause prices to go up again and cause a little bit of a feeding frenzy. So I want to make sure as we're going through this, if you guys have any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. I know we're going through a lot of information tonight. If you have any specific questions or don't agree with something or have a different view, I'm more than willing to talk it out with you. This is the article I was reading was talking about the primary reason why you're buying a home rather than renting. And look, I don't know if you follow the Grant Cardones of the world, or there are people out there that have, big personalities or big followings that say buying a home is a terrible investment. You should rent. It gives you more mobility. It allows you to, if you get a better job across the country, you're not stuck to this home. So I'm curious, do you still think, and drop it in the comment, do you still think owning a home is a good investment in this day and age? And as I wait for those questions to come in, we'll go on and talk about what I wanted to talk about. 29% of the population said, I believe owning a home is better financial investment than renting. Regardless of what you pay for an interest rate, renting is still 100% interest, meaning, yes, you do have, if you rent, look, there are people, if you're not going to be in a location for 5 years or more, I would say in most cases, it is better off to rent than buy. And I obviously know that buying a home is the American dream. And a lot of people have used, especially over the last couple of years, have been able to use owning a home as a way to build a tremendous amount of tremendous amount of equity. Oh, here our first comment. I'm a married redneck. Wouldn't say that people in northern Michigan are rednecks. And I've been to Petoskey Harbor Springs, Bay Harbor, tons with mixed son, never experienced racism. Thank you, Mary. That's a great comment. I have a lot of friends that would say that they're rednecks also. They're great. Those people that identify as rednecks are great people, are hardworking. I agree. Petoskey Harbor Springs, Bay Harbor. One of my really, really good friends is African-American, and I've never experienced anything but racism with him. He actually did our podcast, which if you go to my channel, you can see the podcast I did with Dewan. He said a couple of instances, but he probably would have a couple of instances in Detroit. So I'm glad that that's your experience. The primary reason people are buying versus renting, to get back to this, is I want to live in a place long-term without worrying about moving. Now that's the other side of the coin. So yes, if you rent, you have the ability to move at any time as long as you adhere to the terms of your lease. You're free to do so. On the other side, I can't tell you how many people I've dealt with that have either been renting a house and the sellers wake up one day and for whatever reason in their life decide it's time to sell the house, whether it's a divorce or whether they just want to get the equity out, because look, people buy rental properties for investment reasons. And one day, a lot of those people plan to sell the house and either do a 1031 exchange or, take the equity and go buy a boat or whatever they want to do. So yeah, you do have the ability. When you rent, you do have the ability to move whenever you want to. Your landlord also has the ability to kick you out whenever they want to, as long as they adhere to the lease. So there is some stability in owning a home. and knowing that your housing is taken care of. Needing more space for family, the third biggest reason somebody would buy a house versus renting. Absolutely. Very few apartments are built for 4 or 5 or 6 people. A lot of apartments are 2-bedroom, or even sometimes they're 3-bedroom, but even the 3-bedroom apartments aren't the biggest things you've ever seen. So a lot of people, look, that's a major change in your life, or major life transitions when you start a family or expand your family. And that's also sort of a double-edged sword, of two things at the same time. That's often typically when you plant roots. And that's sort of, again, a part of the American dream, where you have a family, you pick where you're going to settle down, you build your life, you build your business, you go to school, you get involved in the community. And that is a really good reason to buy a home. I want consistent monthly housing payments free from rent increases. Absolutely. If you get a fixed rate mortgage outside of, property taxes once in a while changing a little bit, or your homeowner's insurance changing a little bit, you will have the same housing cost every month. Meaning, hey, we rent our building at the office, the brokerage, we have a landlord, and every year they raise the rent by 5%. And when you own the house or own a building or own whatever, you don't have to worry about those things. So having control over how much, and look, I've rarely heard of people being able to lower the rent, but what can you do when you have a mortgage and the interest rates drop? You refinance, which causes your interest rate to go down, which causes your payment to go down. So in terms of renting, you're very rarely ever going to see your rent payment go down, because that's unfortunately not how the world works. But once in a while, especially people that bought, I sold a ton of houses last year where people are like, I found the house I wanted. I can't afford it today. Yes, it would be nice if it was a little bit less, but the prices, I got the house for the price I want. I got the house. I can check that off my list, and I'm just going to wait it out and refinance. So there are going to be a ton of people, as these rates continue to drop, refinancing and fulfilling that concept. I need to remove myself from the screen so I can see this. Rents are unaffordable in my area. Yes, in a lot of places, renting is actually more expensive than buying. Right now, if you wanted to rent a house in Petoskey, I would tell you to plan on a budget, $3,000, $2,500. You could buy plenty of houses in this area. Maybe not directly in Petoskey, but you can buy plenty of houses in the surrounding areas that would be less than that. And you own the house and you have, something to start building with. I don't want to answer to a landlord leasing company. This is probably the most, this was a very small, the banner's hiding. At least I can remove this banner. This was a very small percentage of the poor population that said, I don't want to answer to a landlord or a leasing company. And I think this is probably a bigger percentage than people think, because when you rent, you obviously don't own the house. You have a leasehold, meaning you have a legal ownership of using the house. You don't own the property, meaning if you want to put up a picture, you want to put up a fence, you want to paint the walls, you want to do anything. If you want to materially change the property, then you're going to have to answer to a landlord or a leasing company. Now, obviously, outside of some of the bigger complexes here, we don't have a lot of landlords or leasing companies that you have to contend with, but landlords are finicky. And I know a lot of people who have rented who have told me horror stories about having landlords that showed up unannounced or wanted to see what they were doing in the house. And they just really the renters really felt like that was an invasion of privacy. Whereas owning a house, you can do whatever you want. If you want to paint the kitchen purple and the bathroom pink, nobody can stop you, other than hopefully me when we start talking about what your resale value is going to be. But other than that, you're free to do whatever you want. You can improve the house. You can put up fences. Again, there's obviously the HOA and sort of things like that to worry about. But other than that, you are free to do whatever you want. On a scale that, I love this one. I'm going to hide my picture on this. On a scale of 1 to 5, how stressed are you about buying a house this year? All buyers are about 25% extremely stressed. First-time buyers specifically, and I really feel for these first-time home buyers. And if you're out there and you're thinking about buying your first home and you stumbled upon me on YouTube or Instagram or wherever, and you've been following me, if you have any questions about what it's like to buy your first home, we've got tons of videos out there, and I'd be happy to be a resource for you. It doesn't have to be scary. A lot of people are buying their first homes. And yes, it's a little bit more competitive than maybe it was 10 years ago. And yes, the prices are more and it costs more, but you can still do it. It's still possible. And you just really need to come up with a plan and make sure you're as educated as possible, which is why I hope you're watching this channel, to try to give yourself a leg up on how to survive and win in the housing market in 2024 and beyond. So repeat buyers are a little bit less concerned, probably because once you've bought a house, the process it should be a lot less foreign to you, and you should be able to act with a lot more confidence. Plus, you're probably entering the market with a little bit of equity from selling your last house, and you're not a first-time home buyer, or either you've gotten some money from your family or you've saved up a down payment. That gives you also a little bit more stress. So I was actually surprised that this number was a little bit lower. I thought if you look at from a scale of 3 to 5, meaning 30%, so I guess 3, 4, 5, you're talking about 60% stressed, 80% stressed on. That's still a big number if you combine the three. So it is still stressful to buy a house. Again, if you're watching this video, if there's anything I can do to make the process easier on you or help you be less stressed and more relaxed about the process, please reach out to me. How do I feel? This is another, these slides, we really put a lot of research into these because I wanted to bring as much relevant information to you and maybe answer some of the questions that you're either afraid to ask or have been thinking about. So how do you feel about the current inventory for sale in the market where you're buying? I have to, and this is a common one. Again, I'm surprised this number is a little bit bigger. I have to stretch my budget to buy a home that I want to live in. This is something I deal with on a daily basis. If you were to call me to buy a house, our initial conversation would be, what are your needs? What are your wants? What is your budget? Are you pre-approved? What do you want to spend? And I get a lot of people that can spend $800, but are pre-approved to $800, but they only are comfortable with $600 because that mortgage payment is what they would like to spend. And it does seem like in Traverse City, Petoskey, Boyne, the areas that I cover, that people feel like the houses based on the price should probably be a little bit nicer or have a little bit more amenities or be a little bit more updated. And that is really what makes, I'll be honest with you, that's probably what makes the hardest part about the buying process is just having to digest that X amount gets you this. And if you come to me, regardless of your budget, I'll be happy to help you. It's just really important that we realize that, hey, I want to spend X amount of dollars. These are 5 houses or 10 houses or 20 houses. And I tell people, once you've seen that many houses, once you call me to look at houses and I show you 10, 15, 20 houses in a price range, that is what that amount of money gets you. And sometimes people are happy and sometimes they're not. And that's just something we have to deal with. And it's a part of the market that I don't like because I want you to buy a house that you love and can live in for a long time and be proud of. And also be able to afford and not feel like, hell, I had to stretch myself so far just to buy a house that I don't love. And that's a really tough feeling when, look, you save up your whole life or you work hard, or you've sold a couple of houses. Did you have some equity and you want to go buy a $500, $700 million house and you want people to come over, your family, your friends, and say, wow, this is a great house. And so often, the house that you get for that price, people tell me they're just not proud of that. And I think it's really something to contend with. There are homes in my market that I would buy, but they don't have everything I want. This is another great one. Even before prices were inflated, this is something we dealt with, meaning people had a list of 10 wants, 10 needs. And right now we're telling people, make sure you focus on, let's try to get you as many of your needs as possible while also trying to get you as many of your wants as possible. Because most of the time the wants you could add later exactly how you want. So let's find what you want or what you need and hit the wants after that. There are enough homes I would buy that are within my budget. 26% said there are enough homes, meaning they're out there, they've got the budget. And this is probably not in Northern Michigan. This is a U.S. News article. And I think that I'd be shocked if 26% of my buyers said there are enough homes within my budget. 17%, and this is a big part of the population that I think is on the sideline, that said there are no homes I would buy that are within my budget. And that is what I think is a lot of the pent-up demand on the sidelines. Meaning they want to buy a house. There are just no homes for sale that are within their budget. And I will tell you, I have probably, it's not 17%. It might be 25, 30, 35% of our buyer leads are in this boat of there are just no homes that they want to buy within their budget, or they have to sacrifice so much that they'd rather not buy it. And again, we haven't seen it. It seems like the secret is out now that Northern Michigan has gotten a lot more expensive, because back in 2020, 2021, we would get people that would call me up and say, "Hey, Gino, I'm ready to buy. I'm excited." They'd come to the office. They'd make an appointment, come to the office, drive all the way up here, and then look at what they got for their money. And I wouldn't hear from them. And a week later, they'd call and say, "We bought somewhere downstate, or we bought in Ohio, or we bought some distant land." And I often get people that call me and they say, "I'm thinking about buying in, Petoskey or, Grand Rapids or the suburbs of Grand Rapids." And so often, unless you are really compelled, if you're just looking at apples to apples and you don't care as much about the lifestyle, it is very, unless you have a very compelling reason to come to Northern Michigan, if you're just looking at price per square foot, odds are you are not going to pick Northern Michigan. It's those of us, or those of you that have moved here or considering moving here or committed to moving here, who have decided that Northern Michigan, yes, it's a little more expensive, but we have great schools, great quality of life. Apparently we have a great football team right now, and want to live that vacation lifestyle year round. So before I move on to the red flags you should avoid when looking at properties, does anybody have any questions about anything we've talked about? What's going to happen after the election, interest rates, inventory? I'll give a second for those questions to come in, and then we'll move on to the second segment, which I try to make these about an hour, and we're right at 31 minutes. So we are right on track. If we go a little bit over tonight because you have questions, happy to listen. Andrew McNaughton asked a great question. What are the percentage of people who are relocating from within Michigan versus outside of Michigan? Now, I can only speak from my personal experience, which I say this all the time, and it's not to brag, but we help a lot of people buy and sell in Northern Michigan. Almost all of our buyers, if you take out the people who have, a $500,000 house in Petoskey that want to buy a $700,000 house in Petoskey, if you take out the people just moving up, if you talk about people relocating here, I would say it is almost 100% from outside of Michigan right now. Maybe 90, to be honest, because there's probably one or two here and there. But my last handful of buyers are Texas, Florida, California. I just had a guy call from Indiana. It's incredible that most of the people relocating here. And that question, Andrew, I really appreciate that question. It sparked, I'm going to call around some of my other friends that produce at a high level here and ask, are they seeing the same thing? I can't believe, usually it's not like one agent in a market is going to see something drastically different. Andrew just told me he's in Florida. Yeah. Andrew, what part of Florida again? I'm just genuinely curious. Another question, Douglas Parrish, what do you know about the hockey youth programs? So my son doesn't play hockey, but a lot of our friends play hockey. And I've heard positive things about the Petoskey Hockey Association. In fact, a good friend of mine, Julianne, her son Aiden, is my son's really good friend. He plays hockey. He's played hockey forever. We just sponsored something at the arena. What's really cool, and I don't know if you know this or not, but Sergei Fedorov's brother, Fedor Fedorov, is the one that started Petoskey Hockey. So talk about a strong bloodline of hockey. And it's funny because there's a private club we go to in the summertime, and Sergei was there all summer because he was staying at his brother's house, and his brother and him, they do a really good job of running Petoskey Hockey. I can certainly find out and report back to you about the ins and outs. And Douglas, if you have any specific questions about Petoskey Hockey, I would love to answer them the best I can. And if I don't, I know a ton of people involved in Petoskey Hockey that I can certainly help you with. Andrew said that he's in Sarasota. How do you like Sarasota? Have you guys avoided, Andrew, have you avoided most of the weather? I think you're probably safe. How has Florida changed in your opinion? And we talked about this last week, to go back to Andrew's original question of people relocating from Michigan, inside or outside of Michigan. It's really, the airport has been the best indicator of where people are coming from. Because remember, we talked about the Traverse City Airport if you were on last week. If not, it was recorded and it's on my channel. We spent time last week speaking about the I lost my train of thought. Sometimes one of the things I need to learn at the lives is keeping track of the questions and my train of thought. So that's a good skill for me to develop. But the Traverse City Airport, there was an article that we shared last week on the live about how much it's expanded. And the reason for that, a lot of people, the article went on to say a lot of people think it's because of tourism, because look, Northern Michigan has been a tourist area. Obviously, the reason we're talking is because it's becoming a little bit, not less tourists, but more people relocating here, which is why we do this. And 97% of the people that come through the airport live here. So it's not people traveling to the area, because Northern Michigan still remains a state that people commute to versus fly to. It's people that live here. And I think that access, and that also demonstrates that people are getting on a plane to come here. And let's face it, if you're relocating from within Michigan, you're likely not flying from Detroit to Traverse City or Detroit to Pellston. You're probably going to drive. So that influx in air traffic is a great indication that the people moving here are not local. And it's not even like they're in the Midwest. Again, like Andrew, they're coming from Florida. They're coming from Texas, sometimes coming from California. I asked Andrew what he thought about Sarasota, Florida. He said overpriced and overpopulated, extreme growth since 2020 COVID. Andrew, what do you think caused that growth in Sarasota, just out of curiosity? So drop a comment. We can continue this conversation. So yeah, this is going to be something, while I wait to see if Andrew has anything more to add, this is going to be something we continue to talk about. It's November 7th. Thanksgiving's around the corner. In terms of real estate, our year is basically over, because it takes a month to 6 weeks to close a house. So do the math. Unless you get your offer accepted in the next couple of weeks, or you're paying cash, you're likely not going to close on a house this year unless you really hustle and the stars align and things go perfectly smoothly. So we are going to continue. These lives are going to be very heavily focused on what to expect in 2025, because I think, it's so interesting that we get a president, and I don't want to make this channel political at all or share my political beliefs or what I think, or, my job is to sell houses. And whether it would have been Harris or now that it's Trump, I would have had to do the same job. I'd have come out here and talk to you the same way. But it'll be interesting, because we had this person in office one other time. So we have a little bit of, now obviously we're not comparing apples to apples, but we do have a little bit of, there's not as much unknown, because we're not getting, this isn't something we haven't been through before. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens going into 2025. I think sometimes just the looming fact of an election negatively impacts the market more than the actual election itself, because how does that saying go? It's the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And I'm not saying Trump's a devil, or I'm not saying anybody's a devil, but I'm saying, what that saying means is knowing what you have to work with is a lot better than not knowing what you have to work with. And right now, you can't use the excuse that you're waiting to see what happens with the election, because it's done, it's over with, time to move forward. Obviously, I think interest rates are going to come down in the first part of 2025. We've seen more inventory coming on the market. There's the short-term rental thing. There's just a lot of variables and moving parts in the market right now. And we're going to watch a close eye on what is happening, week by week on these lives. And the same way that I have to pay attention to the market because I need to help my buyer and seller clients, I'm just going to take that information and share it with you both on these lives and my videos too. Again, if you keep watching those, you're going to feel like you're as dialed into the Northern Michigan real estate inside information as possible. So make sure you keep showing up, and we'll keep talking about what's going on. Andrew answered my question. It made retired people more decisive without any lockdowns and gave them an incentive. That's interesting. So without further ado, we're going to talk about home buying red flags. This is a fun topic. And actually this came about because I was showing houses to a friend of mine who I've done, a ton of work with. We've done a ton of deals together. He's looking for a new house, and he was sending me pictures. He was sending me pictures from the listings about the kind of alcohol that the people would drink. And he believed there's a correlation between the kind of alcohol you drink to the way you kept your house. Now, do you believe that? Do you think people who drink expensive alcohol take good care of their house versus people that drink less expensive alcohol don't care as much about their house? I'd love to hear you comment if you want. I thought that was really interesting. And what I took from that was It's a good friend of mine, so I can say, hey, you might be crazy, but it's also, uh, as you show houses, it made me realize that, yeah, there are subtle things you can pick up on. And when you've been in as many houses as I have, you can walk through a house and almost get an understanding for who the person that lives there is before you even meet them, because they are, the way they keep the house, the way they, mow the yard, the pride of ownership. One of my favorite sayings in life is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if you don't take care of the stuff that we can see, what are you doing with the stuff that we can't see? If you're not taking care of, you're not keeping, if your house isn't clean, do you think that you're making sure your HVAC, your hot water tank, or your foundation, do you think you're taking good care of that stuff? So let's go through this list and home buying red flags. I thought this would be a fun one. And also, as funny as it is, it's also not, it's good information to know whether you're buying a house in Northern Michigan or anywhere. Home buying red flags. So let's get started. Cracked foundation. Now, this is a good one because this can be something or it can be nothing. And it is important to find a qualified professional to tell you if, hey, a lot of homes in Northern Michigan, a lot of homes, a lot of places are old, and there's going to be cracks in the foundation. Sometimes they're catastrophic. Sometimes they're settling or something that's been there a long time and not a big deal. But you're going to want to make sure you know if that's a big deal or not before you purchase the house. Because if it were me, I'd want to know, is this house, the foundation of a house is everything. And if you don't have a solid foundation in the house, then you're going to have problems. And I think that goes for your house or your life or anything else. If you don't have a strong foundation, you're going to have problems later on. Musty, moldy smells. One of the first things people ask me when they're looking at a house is, does it have mold? And sometimes, and there's a lot of people who have allergies that the mold really bothers. And I can't tell you how many times I go into a house and it hits you right away that, hey, they're going to have some moisture issues. Poor roof conditions. This is extremely important in Michigan and Florida for that matter, Andrew. The roof is one of the most expensive maintenance items and also the most important and sometimes the hardest to tell the condition of. So you're going to want to make sure you have a qualified home inspector or a qualified roofer to check out the roof, because you don't want to buy a house and make sure you don't want to buy a house and then find out, unbeknownst to you, that you have to replace the roof a year later, because that's an incredible expense and probably would have caused you to negotiate differently on that house. Also, this is an insider tip, so pay very close attention to this for those of you that are going to purchase a house in the wintertime. It's very common, and it's not their fault, it's just sort of the way the world is. It is very common for a home inspector to say, the roof was covered with snow in the winter, we didn't inspect. And I actually sold a house to a friend of mine about 15 years ago, and I'll never forget this story because it stuck with me. He bought the house in, I want to say it was like March or April, like right in that where he looked at it the first time. It was in Northern Michigan from 1 week to the next or a couple weeks apart. It can go from the dead of winter to feeling like spring like that. So he got caught in this trap where he went to the house, looked at the house, everything was good. They did the home inspection. The home inspector said, tons of snow on the roof, I can't check it out. A week later, all that snow melted and they saw the house. Luckily, they were still within their home inspection period and they were able to negotiate for a brand new roof. Now, if that would have been seasonally or whatever, a week different either way, they probably wouldn't have realized they had a problem and would have bought that house and had to put a roof on almost immediately. And when you're buying a house, the last thing you want is a surprise $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 expense. So make sure the roof is checked out. Make sure not only are they looking at the shingles, they're looking in the attic to make sure there's no leaks and you're getting a quality roof. Outdated or damaged HVAC. HVAC is the heating and air conditioning in a house. Outside of the roof and the foundation, this is another one of the most major expenses. Make sure your home inspector checks out the HVAC. They're going to tell you when you buy a house and you go to do your home inspection, they're going to tell you how old the HVAC is and also how many years left it has. So take that into account. If it's at the end of its lifespan, there's a good chance you're going to have to replace that in the coming years. So factor that in. And on the other side of that is if you're looking at a house that has an updated HVAC, you can buy it with a little bit more peace of mind that this is going to last a long time. And all houses aren't created equally. If you're looking at two houses and one has an updated HVAC and one doesn't, that would give it a clear advantage. Also, on the flip side, if you're a seller and you want to sell your house and you know your roof is old or you know your HVAC is old, you can try to hide it, you can try to ignore it, but one day the buyers are going to find out. So make sure those things are updated if you want to get the most amount of possible out of your house. Signs of water damage. This is a good one. Signs of water damage are sometimes easy to see and sometimes hard to see. I actually bought a house one time that had in the basement from the primary bath shower had leaked and you couldn't even see it. And I'm a real estate agent. I've obviously been doing this for a long time. And I went back and looked at my home inspection pictures and you could see a little spot on the ceiling and I didn't think anything of it. But when you went to touch it, it was soft because that drain had been leaking and I had to put an entire new shower in. So pay attention to water damage. And it's not just the roof. Look below the bathrooms, look everywhere because sometimes it's easy to see. Sometimes it's not easy to see. And some of the telltale signs, here's another secret. Some of the telltale signs, you probably already know this, but in case you don't, are miscolored paint. If there's a spot that has paint that's a little bit different than the rest, why is that? Was there a leak there one time? Was it fixed? And look, just because a house has a leak doesn't mean it's a terrible house. They could have fixed it, but make sure that if they had a leak and they've disclosed it, that you find out how they fixed it to make sure they did it the right way. Outdated plumbing. This is another good one. Make sure, and your qualified inspector can help you with this, make sure your plumbing is up to date. Make sure that it's working. There's nothing that needs to be fixed, that the plumbing's in good working condition. And again, guys, a lot of these things your home inspector is going to be able to point out to you. So make sure you have a good home inspection done on whatever house you purchase. Pay attention to the report because a lot of these things come up, and do not be afraid to ask questions, especially if you're working with me. We're going to make sure that you're going to buy a house that you like and also is in great working condition. Ceiling or wall cracks. This goes along the lines of the foundation. Now, this is one of those I have not dealt with a lot in my life. I've sold houses that have ceiling or wall cracks, but every single time that I can remember, it's been because of a little bit of settling or something that wasn't catastrophic. So make sure if you're buying a house and you do see cracks that you're asking a qualified professional, why did this happen? Is it a big deal? Is it a little deal? You know, a lot of times in Michigan, houses are closed up in the winter, and although I think that is the worst thing that you can do to a house, just a house being closed up in the winter causes things to contract or expand, and that will cause some cracking, which isn't life or death. But make sure if you see cracks or if something, I guess we're going to keep going through these, but my overwhelming advice to you would be if you see something that doesn't look right, say something, because this is a huge purchase for you and you don't want any surprises later on because, you know, it's like the farmer's insurance or whatever insurance company says, you know, they can help you with anything because they've seen anything. I've seen everything, and I've seen, you know, they're few and far between, but I've seen a handful of people buy houses. I've heard horror stories from other agents of people buying houses and then finding out later on that there was something drastically wrong with the house. And also in Michigan, we have what's called a seller's disclosure, which is a sheet, I wish I had one with me, that goes through and the seller fills out everything that's right, wrong, bad, ugly with the house, and you rely on that. So make sure the seller has filled out the seller's disclosure honestly, because a lot of times that's not the case. And it's not something we deal with a lot, but believe it or not, people aren't always as honest as you'd like them to be. So make sure you're checking out the seller's disclosure, asking as many questions as you want, having the seller verify whatever information you need. And look, if you're watching my YouTube channel because you want to learn more about buying a house in Northern Michigan or anywhere, you're probably more of the research type, which is like I am. So make sure if you like researching, research the house you're buying, because you're going to want to find out as much as you can to make a qualified decision or make a educated decision. Messy for showings. I don't know if she's watching or not, but I'll put her on blast. Candace, my assistant, just bought a house maybe a year or two ago, and beautiful home. They sold their home, upgraded, great house, view of the water. And it was a little bit messy during the showings, and they didn't think anything of it. The people are moving out. And look, it's not uncommon for a house to be messy when you show it because people are in the process of moving out. So she was bought the house. There was like I wish she was on her. If she's like, Candace, if you're watching, respond to what happened. There was like a chest or something that was in the basement that was in a certain spot. And during the home inspection, they weren't able to move it because it was big. The people moved out, they moved it, and there was a ton of mold behind the wall. And sometimes I don't know that they did this on purpose, although maybe it felt like that one did. A house isn't messy to hide anything, although it makes the inspection and the showing, it makes it a little harder to see what's going on with the house when there's stuff everywhere. So make sure if you're looking at a house or you're doing the inspection and there's a bunch of stuff everywhere, at least pull it away from the walls, right? I'm not saying you have to move a bunch of people's stuff when they're trying to move. And it's not uncommon for somebody to be moving when they're trying to, it's not uncommon for somebody to be moving during the showings, but make sure that that doesn't distract you from getting a thorough look at what's going on with this house. So that is the list of the biggest red flags you should look at when you're viewing a house. Making sure the structure of the house is intact, the foundation, the roof, there's no settling, there's no cracking, there's no water damage, that you're buying a quality house. Now, I'm not saying go overboard because look, unless you're buying a new construction, and odds are if you're buying a house in Northern Michigan, it's not going to be new construction because we don't have a lot of new construction here, that there's going to be some issues and that these are not brand new houses. And a lot of times, especially downtown, Petoskey, Traverse, Boyne, Harbor, those downtown houses are a little bit older. They're going to have some things wrong with it, as long as they're not things that are going to cause you a lot of hassle, a lot of headache, and that sort of thing. So just make sure you're making an educated decision. You know what you're getting into. And look, if you're buying a fixer-upper, make sure you just know how much fixer-upping it needs and that you're not biting off more than you can chew and you're not putting yourself in a position where you're going to be disappointed in the purchase. So with that being said, I'm open for questions. I'll put the Q&A up. If you have any questions before we part ways for this week, let me know. I'm excited. I love doing these. A lot of you have reached out to me. I get questions. It surprises me. I actually get questions directly after these videos, after these lives, asking questions that maybe people were a little bit shy or afraid to ask in front of everybody. So I'm going to keep doing these every Thursday at 7 p.m. If you're watching the replay, I appreciate that. If you think there's anybody that can benefit from watching one of these lives to either buy a home in Northern Michigan or buy a home anywhere, because let's face it, a lot of what we talk about here is very specific to Northern Michigan, but a lot of it is just specific to buying a house. And to be honest, if you sent the first half of this video was probably a little bit more geared towards Northern Michigan, but the second half, that's just good advice to buy a house anywhere, whether you're buying a house in Sarasota, Florida, or Petoskey, Michigan, or on the moon one day. Making sure you're buying a house or knowing what you're getting into is as important as it gets, and that can be super helpful. So if you know of anybody that would find benefit in this, please share it with them. If you think of anybody that can benefit from the videos we put out, again, I'd really appreciate you share with them. I appreciate your subscription, your support, and I will talk to you next week.